Right. Oh, not quite live yet. Setting up your webinar for YouTube Live. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. People are going to start joining. Please remember, let's make sure that I can be heard. Yep, I can be. Gotta check the sound out. So please welcome everyone. So glad to be here again. It's that time again for our weekly get together where we can discuss the things that are most important. As you can tell, it's extremely important to me. I mean, my entire life, the only purpose of my life is to amplify and deepen my own awakening and to do everything I possibly can to wake up everybody I possibly can. Because it's the only thing that will save us. And all awakening means is that you are no longer identified with the conditioned patterns, the programmed responses, and the view of yourself and the universe that is a result of a very narrow focus of attention. And that's all it is, a narrow focus of attention. And the perimeter of our focus of attention is determined by what we believe to be true. And that's a big thing to grasp. And we've kind of skirted around it. We've talked about it a little bit. People are talking about it more, the mind-body connection and the energetic, the effect, of different vibrations on our system, like Dr. Emoto and the experiments he did with water, exposing water to different emotional vibrations and the effect that it had, that they got imprinted there. Things like the metaphysics, really the whole new thought thing that got started in the late 19th century, and all the way up to The Secret and the Law of Attraction, is all kind of beginning to push the edge of that perimeter and say there's way more to this. But it doesn't take much of a view of scrutiny to look at the nature of perception, to realize that we live within a bubble of our own creating. We live in that bubble because we have a mutual self-created universe. Even the sense of a self is really just the information that we're receiving from the senses, and then the conclusions we draw about the nature of what we are experiencing. Well, the whole point of non-dual awakening is to recognize that the nature of what you are experiencing is in fact yourself, is the experiencer, and not some external object out there that is somehow being experienced. It's kind of like, the whole idea of the holographic universe, that I can't remember the guy's name now who came out with that, who did that book about it, but that it's even beyond that, in that the hologram itself is in the holographic universe. The only thing that's not in the hologram is the one who is perceiving it. And I heard recently of the fellow who wrote that book, had a party, and he had a stage hypnotist come to the party to entertain. And the hypnotist, he's hypnotizing various people, but this one guy in particular, he left the post-hypnotic suggestion. And the post-hypnotic suggestion was you are not going to see your daughter. His daughter's in the room there, right? And that when he take him out of hypnosis, he would not see his daughter. And so he had his daughter standing, the hypnotist had his daughter standing right in front of him and woke him up from the hypnosis and says, well, where's your daughter? He looks around. He says, I don't know. I can't see her. Now that's common. We experience that. But here was the really interesting thing. He walked behind the daughter, who's standing now in between himself, the hypnotist, and the man who had been hypnotized, who's under this post-hypnotic suggestion. And he says, he holds up his watch like this, and he says, what am I holding up? He says, your watch. He says, well, what time does it say? And he read him the time. Now, according to any of our normal conventional ideas about the nature of reality and the material nature of reality, that shouldn't have been able to happen. But it did, right? Because the reality of her was simply what's the best way to put it? The potential for her, the potential for all of us exists simultaneously in all places, in all times. But it takes a perceiver in order for that energy, that vibration to like collapse, you might say, into a form. And in that particular place, the receiver, which was him, did not allow that to be collapsed, and he could see right through her. Now that's pretty fascinating to ponder. Now, I think these things are important to ponder because they break down the barrier we have. They break down these assumptions we have. It is our assumptions that hold us in bondage. We think these assumptions are all based on facts and truth and stuff out there, and none of them are. The only actual fact, the only real thing is your being. And I don't mean your being in a body or in a form. I don't mean your being as conditioning and thoughts and emotions and sensations. I mean whatever it is that is actually perceiving. And that which is actually perceiving is the only thing that actually exists. Everything else is a temporary modulation of that. A moment when something condenses into a form. The potential for that is absolutely everywhere simultaneously, but a moment, certain patterns of conditions exist, and suddenly something pops up into existence. Ponder this deeply. You are only imprisoned by your own beliefs and nothing else. That's why satsang is all about questioning those beliefs, questioning them right down to the root. So on that note, I will go and start saying hello to everyone and welcoming everyone. Glad you're here. It's a beautiful cloudy day in Washington State in the United States. I know many of you are all over the world that are listening in. Billy Boy, hi Billy Boy, sound clear? Hugs from Florida. Thanks, and hugs to you too. Maureen, Julian, hi G, thanks for this coming satsang, good sound. Excellent. Dale Wiggins, hello Dale, good afternoon GP and all. Do you have any theory on what has happened with oneness consciousness when under general anesthesia? Yes, oneness consciousness simply does not have access in that moment. It has literally tuned everything out. Like the man under hypnosis I described in the beginning, not seeing his own daughters, that's all it does, is it puts us in the state where no experience is collapsing, but you're still there. I mean, where consciousness doesn't have a locality. It's not sitting somewhere. It doesn't need to be activated. It is always there. But we always like to think of consciousness as our waking state and conscious of stuff going on in the life. But it's consciousness whether there's absolutely nothing in the field of perception, or if there's this explosive universe going on in the field of perception, it makes no difference. It is still consciousness. And so it doesn't go anywhere. It's such a hard thing to grasp. Consciousness is not in space or time. So you can't refer to it as being somewhere or sometime. I was conscious. Well, what are you now? Right? So yes, we can cut off information, right? I mean, but where does consciousness go? I'm not the least bit aware of what's happening in China or Bali or down in the depths of the Pacific Ocean. They're completely outside of the information that I'm receiving. But does that mean I'm unconscious? Where's consciousness gone? Right? So it gets so narrow that we don't perceive anything. We say, oh, I'm unconscious. Well, no, not at all. It's just the screen is blank. That's it. You're still there, which is everywhere, because when it's outside of space and time, you can't think of it in terms of being somewhere. It's the best we can do is it's everywhere. It's like it's a field. It's like space itself. You look at you hear people talk about, I live by the Pacific Ocean, right? And the Puget Sound, right? And then somebody on the East Coast, they live by the Atlantic Ocean, and somebody more down south, like Texas, they live in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, take a step back for a second, right? There's no lines that we make that up. There's only water, the oceans. All the division between them are completely made up by our minds, and yet we honor them. We believe it, right? There's no difference between the ocean and the sound here, none. So we create boundaries that don't actually exist. Then we make rules for ourselves. Then we live inside of those rules. Right? But now just take a big step back. The entire picture from beginning to end is being perceived by something that's not in the picture. And that's what's important. The perceiver of everything is not in the perceived package. It's not on the desktop. You are not a form. That which is hearing my words right now is the timeless, spaceless, formless reality. You can't give it a name, really. You can't the moment you put a form around it, it's no longer infinite. It's just our beliefs don't allow us, and our very materialistic world now does not compute with the idea that you could exist without being an object. And that's the nature of the egoic mind, to turn everything into an object. And when the egoic mind takes over, you get the world that we're living in. It is traumatized egos running every country on the planet. I don't know of any country that actually has a sane leader. They're all insane. They're all traumatized children who have never actually come to terms with their own feelings. And it ends up becoming pathological. So they can make wars, they can kill, they can do all sorts of horrible things without any empathy. Right? They cannot feel with the effect of their own actions. It's completely narcissistic. It's completely self-centered. I don't know why I got off into that, but that's what happens. That's what, when that boundary goes around, I become, in my imagination, because I can't really become that, I become the ego. I become a separate self. So consciousness, what you are, is never in abeyance. It can be conscious of nothing, but it's never in abeyance. And it is not the body. Looking for consciousness in the body is like looking for the singer in the radio. They're not there. Ava, hello Ava. Namaste GP and everybody. Ready words of truth are very much welcome. Very good. For me too. David and Elaine. Hi, GP and all. Greetings from Southeast England. Hi, David and Elaine. Wonderful. Ducks. Come on. Oh, my. Boy, that went fast. Look, I got a ton of questions already. Where are you, Ducks? There you go. I've been meditating on the feeling of silence, and I experienced this sound. It's quite loud, almost deafening. Combined with the feeling of now and the present, the tension builds up beautifully. Wow. Not sure what to respond to that, but silence, again, our very limited materialistic minds think of silence as nothing. Think of emptiness as nothing. Think as consciousness separate from forms as nothing. And in fact, it's quite living. Silence is a word we use to designate the utter emptiness and stillness of all that is. The ultimate reality, which is the potential for every manifestation of that reality simultaneously. But it's still potential. It's the unmanifest. Silence is simply the unmanifest. Sound, om, music, those are all the manifest silence. Because the silence is still there, right? Just because there's a sound going on, it's not playing back and forth silence. The underlying thing is still there. It's like an object, this body, right, doesn't displace space, right? It doesn't push space out of the way, right? It's integrated into space. Space it is the space, right? So you can't really, you can't look at silence like it's something that doesn't have life, right? It is the nature of life. And to meditate on that silence is to come into contact with you. And don't be surprised if it starts making sounds. because it's the source of sound. Right? It's not, when sound comes, silence is not absent. It's always present. It's just punctuated with sound. Like space is always present. It's only punctuated with form. We only become aware of space when there are forms in it, so that we could talk about the distance between two forms. If you take all the forms out, space becomes what? It's not nothing, but it becomes indetectable, ineffable, unknowable. Silence is exactly the same thing. It isn't as silence is broken by sound. It is silence vibrating that makes sound. The essence of Om, right? Hope that makes a little bit of commentary for you there, Ducks. Robert Goldberg. Hi, GP from Southern Nevada. Hi, Robert. Teresa, hi. Lovely to be here with you once again. Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. David and Elaine. Is the experience of chronic illness the last defense of identification with the separate self? No, it's not the last. It's just one, right? The sense of being a separate self, that is, which you cannot be, by the way. I keep wanting to bring that back. It's not like you've become a separate self and now somehow you have to get out of it. You can only become the separate self in imagination. You cannot actually do it. Consciousness cannot be made infinite, finite, because it is infinite. And that's the forever fact. Within consciousness, though, you can have a bubble that imagines itself to be something else that is limited. And that's what we experience as a separate self. And that there's limitations, because they aren't really natural, they're completely made up, they're dreamlike, they have no substance to them. There's no permanent characteristic to them. So they're shifting. Now that's very disconcerting to us because we're looking for something solid. Of course, we're looking for something solid where there's nothing solid whatsoever. It's all imagination. It's all dreamlike. It's like trying to grab something in your dream. And so out of that sense of a separate self arises all the ills that flesh is heir to. All the stupidity and barbarism and cruelty and war and greed and ignorance on a global level. And on a personal level, it makes for sickness, for pain, for denial, for avoidance. And so separate, the last identification with separate self doesn't have any particular symptom to it. Anyone can be the last one, right? But chronic illness, to me, is actually not a problem to be solved, but a wake-up call to be heeded. The thing about pain is that it basically won't take no for an answer. It's not going to let you off the hook, right? It's just going to decide, yeah, he's had enough. I'm going to leave him alone now. Something is demanding attention. Now, if we look at the universe as just this big amorphous material blob out there, then the only thing that's telling us is that there's something physically wrong with the body. Now, what's fascinating is that, you know, the mind-body continuum, which is becoming increasingly accepted, has shown quite clearly that chronic illness and the like, any kinds of illnesses, can actually be healed through a shift of perception, through actually listening to that, but listening to it on a different level. It has been demonstrated that people have chronic pain, and they'll be examined, and the doctors can't find anything. Right? Sometimes there'll be some thing that they can say, okay, that's probably it. But that's only because we have this very narrow perspective of what life actually is. If you look closely, it's this enormously complex and multidimensional intelligence. And so the source of some chronic pain can be a childhood trauma. It can be a past life experience. It can be some kind of stuck energy. It can be a reflection of something going on the other side of the world, because this is all one. Right? There's not a bunch of different bodies here. There's a bunch of different condensations of exactly the same substance. And so because it is all the same substance, you can't even think of it as being connected. It's not connected. It's the same thing. And therefore, any kind of thing that feels that we know something's wrong, right? We're not supposed to be in pain. We're not supposed to be suffering. Right? It's not supposed to be happening, right? So if it is, it means something's really off. Now, if we limit our focus just to materiality, we're just going to look at the body, we're going to make some adjustments, and that's what they do. You know, they'll fuse, they'll do really barbaric things like, fuse vertebrae together and stuff like that, and like just to try to do something structurally to get rid of the pain, and not ever even consider that its source may have nothing to do with the body at all. The source may in fact be influencing the body. And even if there is something wrong with the body, something visible or structural, what caused it? What caused it to go out of whack? Right? And we don't look, we simply don't believe in this lower substratum. And it's to our peril. That's the nature of materialism, though. So, but to be really clear about your question, it's just in chronic illness, chronic pain is just something that is forcing you to bring your attention to what matters. It's not just there for you to fix it and be gone and be done and go back to the way things were. It is an invitation to step out of the way things are. It is an invitation to explore the depth of your being. And, when it's pain, it's an offer you can't refuse, right? Because it's just everywhere you turn. So there is no last defense of identification. The last defense and the first defense are the same. I am this body. I am separate. And it's simply a belief. It's a belief that simply arose as an interpretation of experience. What you are experiencing is consciousness. What is doing the experiencing is consciousness. It is an absolute non-dual unity. Chris Gills. Hello, Chris. Hello, GP. Great to see you again. Can you speak on the non-doer concept? Is this all a movie and we're just watching everything take place untouched by any event? Yes and no. And this is really, really important because this is one of the places where a lot of non-dual teachers miss the boat. Because there is no doer, right? But there is doing. So nothing's happening, no one's doing anything. Well, no one's ever done anything. The idea that I am acting independently of all life is demonstrably untrue. Everything I know of that is acting, right, is acting through this structure, this incredibly complex structure of a body. And yet, if you take the entire thing apart, you cannot find anyone there. You cannot find a doer. Buddha put it like this. He says, there is a road, there's a walking on the road, but there's no traveler. To let go of the idea of doership is to let go of the ego. The ego wants to be the doer. It wants to take credit for what happens, right? But the doer shows up after events have actually occurred. And this has been proven through the various kinds of, through MRIs and the like. They first discovered this doing research with biofeedback machines. And it's been confirmed now that we have far more sophisticated instruments to measure these kinds of things. And that is the impulse to act and the beginning of the action takes place before there is a cognizance of it in the other part of the brain. So this part of the brain fires, I'm doing something, and then this part of the brain fires and says, I'm doing something. The action comes first. This blows people's mind, and we don't want to accept it. So we have, free will and choice and all of that kind of stuff. It's very disconcerting, but it's only disconcerting to the sense of a separate self, which needs something to do, something to define itself with. But the separate self is an illusion. It doesn't exist. There's only one stupendous whole, one infinite functioning. So there's no doer of it, right? In order to be a doer, you have to have, somebody thinking something up and then doing it. And you don't find that. I mean, examine any thought you have, and before that thought occurs, there's just nothing. It just comes out of nowhere. Can you call yourself the thinker? Right? What you are experiencing is thoughts. You are clearly witnessing those thoughts occurring. Are you the creator of them in the sense of it being an act of will, an act of doing? Or are they spontaneously arising? If you really look for yourself, you'll see they're spontaneously arising. And I just have a belief that I somehow created it. Well, if I did, I'd need to have some kind of evidence, some memory of me creating it, where the only thing I've actually experienced is a thought appearing out of nowhere. That's it. An impulse to move comes out of nowhere. When we examine it carefully and deeply, we simply find that there's just the functioning of life. That's what's happening. Life is functioning. It is infinite. It is universal. It is massive, and a total mystery as to this infinite ocean of possibility. This happened for a moment, right? The satsang, right? And think about the sheer volume of things that had to come into being for us to be sitting here pondering these questions together. People all over the world. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where this was science fiction. Right? What we're doing right now was science fiction. Like that long ago, people had seen a silent movie for the very first time ever. A picture of something else moving. I mean, this is recent in historic terms, but think about all of the inventions at the level of the optics, the electronics, the mechanical part, the shapes, the designs, the words, the ideas, the spread of it. Every single individual that contributed to that had a life. And they came from somewhere in an education. You realize that if any one of these little bits that came together to make this moment happen didn't, this moment would not have happened. Something else would have been happening. To truly grasp this is to step in to the infinite mystery of this, and to have awakened within you such an awe that we're actually the witnesses of this. We're conscious of it. This is staggering. All of the infinite number of things that had to happen for this moment to happen. So you say, am I a doer? Which is, do I cause things to happen? No, you don't. You are the witness to what in fact is an infinite cause, right? Quote Nisargadatta, everything causes everything. That's the only way you can do it. Our minds want to trace a neat little cause and effect track very linearly from here to there. Oh my God, it's so narrow. It's such a narrow point of view. But that's what we want to do. Of course, the reason we want to do that is because we feel like we're a separate self. And if I can track all of that, I can control it and I'll be safe. I mean, that's, it's a very primitive motivation behind it. But there is no such thing, right? It is not linear. It is an internal explosion. It is an internal, spontaneous arising. And why something arises is because this arose. But why did this rise? Because that arose. And it just spreads out in every single direction simultaneously. It is unfathomable. And yet, here we sit discussing it. How is that possible? Because it's what we are. You don't have to fathom it with your mind. You're it. The mind is trying to fathom you, and it can't do it. So I like the way, are we just watching everything take place untouched by any event? And that's a very important thing, because this is more than just philosophical, because when you realize that you are that space in which it's happening, that you are the awakened witness to it, you see that no matter what comes up, no matter what happens in the entire universe, you are unaffected. You remain. The essential nature is simply that which is aware of, is not changed, touched, tainted, colored at all by what it is aware of. Pure awareness has no form, it has no place, it has no time. And so, yes, it is completely untouched by events. And it is not the doer of events, because it's not in time. In order for an event to take place, there has to be time. But out of its infinite nature, time is a possibility, and it has arisen. And this is the universe we happen to have right now. that awareness is aware of, but it's a spontaneous arising. No, there's no doing. John M says, namaste, nice haircut. Thank you, John. Does that do it for you, Chris? It's a very powerful thing to ponder, and if you really ponder it, when you ponder it without sufficient depth, it's frightening because it's a loss of control, and the mind is scared to death and doesn't even want to go there. I mean, this bit of information that I shared about the activity in the brain demonstrating when the sense of doership arises, and it's always after the deed has already started. This has been known for a while, right? But you're not seeing it anymore. You're not hearing it talk about it. It's revolutionary, but you're not hearing it talk about. People don't want to hear that. Right? You have to dive in. You have to be willing to dive in more deeply, because when you do, the burden of life comes off. You realize you've never controlled anything. We're so afraid, what if I'm not the doer, I'm going to get squashed. Well, that's the sense of a separate self. You aren't the doer, you never were, and you're not being squashed, are you? That's because life is taking care of life. That's what it does. And it allows you to just completely let go of self-concern. This body, this one right here, through which I, which am not this body, am speaking, is changing constantly, and it's going to go away. I'm going to watch it go away. and I'm going to watch what happens after that. Because the I in the universe, is not touched by any of the content. It had no beginning and it had no end. It is simply the completely formless background that is the conscious perceiver of everything that happens. Johanna, hi Johanna. My nervous system's happy place. Here with you all at Satsang. Hello from Jalisco, Mexico. Yes, my happy place too. I like it. And thank you for the compliment on the haircut. Lyrics. What's the point of coming into the physical dimension if all we're doing is becoming source consciousness again? Is there a bigger purpose? Thanks. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful question. Well, here's the important thing. You didn't come into the physical universe. Right? You can see the cosmological model, right? There's this physical universe that exists independently of my perception of it. And I'm off in some other place or some other dimension. And then for some reason, I come into this physical plane, right? And now I'm physical. And I'm in this physical plane and it sucks. There's nothing but suffering. How do I get out of here, right? You're right. It makes absolutely no sense at all as a spiritual perspective, right? So it can't be that, right? The fact of the matter is that you never came to a physical place. There is no physical place. Everything we experience is perceptual. It's all happening within the mind. It is always happening within consciousness. So there's a dream of a physical place, but there is no physical place. And why did it arise? Well, that's the gazillion-dollar question. The fact is, it did. But the arising of it, a sense of there being a physical plane, that arising cannot blot out the fact that you're not physical and the physical plane isn't actually physical. Physical, by definition, physical means it exists independently of me, right? It's objective, it's there. And so we have this idea that there's this world, and then I'm coming into the world, and then I die out of the world, and then I reincarnate again. So the world becomes a constant. We imagine that this thing is a constant. But if you examine it closely, you find it's nothing but perceptions. So the physical world is the distortion of our perception when we believe ourselves to be a separate self. If I believe myself to be a separate self, there's me here. I'm going to identify with the body as the boundary of that self. Everything else becomes other, And now I'm trying to put together some kind of explanation as to what I am and what everything else is. And it all grew out of the false notion of being a separate self. And so the other must be, what is it? Okay, so it's other, it's objective, it exists separately from me. It must be made of something. Okay, it's made of matter. And so now matter becomes a thing in and of itself. Right? And the entire thing is happening within perception. There is no physical universe. So what has arisen is a sense of separation. And that sense of separation believed has simply compounded, has amplified itself, right? So the moment that belief gets put in place, it collects other beliefs around it, and those collect other beliefs around it. Before we know it, we have this entire superstructure of a conceptualization of reality that is based on a false premise. So the purpose, if you can use such a term, is to simply awaken. Well, why did this arise? Well, the actual answer to that question is it didn't. Why do we dream the way that we dream? Why a particular character in the dream? These are very spontaneous arisings. Some people say it's because infinite consciousness wanted to experience. You can only experience through opposites. You can't experience as one. It's the essential, it's the essential mystery. And I don't say that in a way of just trying to shut off inquiry, because of course that's not what I want to do. But a mystery, what a mystery is simply that something that cannot be explained within the confines of our current model. So if there is no physical dimension, then what we are actually experiencing is simply non-physical conceptualization, images, dreams, all subjective, all within us. And the process of awakening is awakening from that dream to realize that you are not the separate self. And that is the purpose of human life, is to awaken to being who you actually are. And if in between lives you go someplace and come to, that's true no matter where, no matter what. If you died and gone to heaven, right? You find there's heaven and all this kind of stuff. It's you're still, what are you? What are you that is perceiving it? That's the question it keeps coming back to. So whether it takes 1,000 lives, 1,000,000 lives, or 10 minutes, the purpose is to know who you are. Now, how we forgot? Mooji makes a beautiful statement. He said, I am, before the idea that I could forget or the idea that I needed to remember was believed. My mission here is to invite you into this level of inquiry. Where did the belief arise from? And am I actually even the believer of them? Or did the believer and the belief arise simultaneously? That's what Buddha said. Dependent arising, he called it. The dreamer is the dream. And both of them are appearing as a unity to that which is never dreaming. The pure, absolute awakeness, which is fully self-aware at all times. That is the real you. Not this version of it, not this conceptual version of it, not this one trying to figure things out, not even the spiritual seeker. Awakeness is all there is. Does that help lyrics? Are you a lyricist? Is that what the lyrics comes from? You're a songwriter? John M., what is suffering? What is the absence of suffering? And how do we know that it's even possible? Thank you. Well, you've experienced it, right? You've experienced times when you're not suffering. In our modern world, those times are getting fewer and farther between. We're, for genuine freedom from suffering, we've substituted distraction and intoxication and all sorts of other things. So suffering is our intuitive sense that something's off. It's the part of you that simply knows the truth. It knows that things are off. And so it becomes an invitation to make them right. And of course, we have a million ways in which people say, this is how you alleviate suffering. This is how you alleviate suffering. You have to go to the cause. You have to go to the very first cause of it, which is exactly what Buddha did, which is why he became the Buddha. And the first cause was the belief in the sufferer, right? A circumstance happens, right? The circumstance in and of itself, I don't care what it is absolutely neutral. Nothing in the circumstance announces itself as untoward, as good or bad, as right or wrong, as up or down, any of that. It just is. Suchness, it is simply what it is. The perceiver of the event will interpret the event, and in that interpretation create happiness or suffering. But neither of those are in the event. They are all in the perceiver of the event. Recognizing that, Buddha took it a step further. He recognized that the perceiver of the event was also being perceived. That the one suffering was itself something being perceived, and that the sufferer was not real. It was simply a collection of thoughts and reactions, a sense of self projected upon what in fact was not a self, just a collection of energy, a bunch of vibrations. That was the end of suffering. Now, the way we like to interpret it, we think the end of suffering is a change of circumstance, because we think this circumstance is creating the suffering. It's not. Our perception of it is creating the suffering, and our perception is driven by our self-image. So when any event is perceived, and no one arises, no doer, no sufferer, no person arises to react to it according to a programmed response, there's no suffering in awareness. The suffering and the sufferer and the event are all being perceived by that which is not suffering. It is not touched at all by it. And that's where the sense coming back to, you are just the pure witness. That's all there is. You are witnessing it. And the self you think you are is nothing but a bunch of thought forms, emotional patterns, and programs and sensations that have just congealed into a form, right? And that too is utterly neutral, right? There's no suffering in that. It's only when this thought of I, and it says, I am that conditioning, I am those emotions, I am those thoughts, I am this experience, that an imaginary person comes into being, and that one suffers. The experience of suffering alerts the whole story that something's wrong. Of course, the beginning, it reaches all, looking for love in all the wrong places, and we'll we'll get some, maybe even get some relief temporarily, but only when you finally trace it all the way back and find out that the sufferer themselves is the real mischief maker. not the event, not the experience. The one who is suffering is the illusion. That's the dreamer in the dream. And the one who is witnessing the suffering, the sufferer, isn't suffering. And so the sense of I divorces itself from the imaginary self that has been projected on circumstance and returns back home to its source, which is the actual reality of your being. Does that answer it for you, John? I hope so. Dave Scott. Hi, Dave. Namaste from Philly. I believe it might have been Greg Braden regarding a holistic universe. Could I know he picked up that theme, but I don't think he's the one who originated. I could be wrong. But the important thing is that that view of things, well, it's certainly a big step ahead. It's kind of like the Matrix view of things. It's certainly a big step ahead. It says it's a hologram being produced by the brain. I said, well, the brain's in the hologram. What's actually producing it? Right? Where's the hologram coming from? So the model of a hologram is useful, but it's also a little misleading because it's sitting on top of our assumption that I live in a physical universe, that my experience is physical. And it's in complete opposition to the idea that consciousness is self-existent, which is the standpoint I and every new non-dual teacher on the planet takes. And if they don't, they're not a non-dual teacher. There's something else. Sally. Hi, Sally. Hi, Sally from Southeast England. Good to see you here. A friend of mine is grief-stricken after losing her husband. Is her suffering an illusion? Oh. Now, if I was one of those neo-invited teachers, I'd say, yes, absolutely, it's an illusion, and I'd blow it off. There'd be no heart in that answer, and that's why I'm pausing, right? Because suffering is a resistance to what is. It is not necessarily pain. It is not pain, and it is not grief. Right? Let me make this clear. Right? The event that took place is she lost her husband. It's an event took place. No denying it. Her feelings about it. I mean, if you've been with somebody, if anybody's been in an intimate relationship for any length of time at all, you realize how you begin to flow as one energy. Right? That's the beauty of the relationship, that it comes together. And you don't just decide for yourself anymore. Your whole thought process now is intertwined with theirs. Everything you think, I'd like to do that. I wonder if they want to do that. Right? And it happens on every single level, spiritual level, emotional level, physical level, right? So that there's, the two of you create a new environment in which the two of you now inhabit. The relationship is like an entity in and of itself, right? And so the nervous system, which is simply our capacity to adapt into take the shape of whatever environment we're in, now takes that shape. I'm not one, I am two. We are one. And so everything, right, is everything you feel is going back and forth constantly. You feel what they feel. They feel what you feel. I mean, the lines between you get very blurred in that. So here's this energetic environment that the two have occupied, right? And hopefully happily occupied, intimately occupied, enjoyably occupied, right? But is inevitable in all forms. It eventually has to dissolve. And usually one goes first. Now just think of it in those terms, that all of a sudden you're in this environment completely intertwined with this other powerful energy, as powerful as your own, right? That is both being self-created and other-created. And suddenly the half of it, the main component other than you, is gone. Your entire environment is completely shifted. The whole energy flow. It's as if suddenly, the sun disappeared and the earth has just started to fly off on its own. There's no organization. There's no point of reference. There's no emotional stability. There's no home, right? When that happens, the nervous system goes into grief. And what is grief but the nervous system responding to an irrecoverable loss? And now it has to now adapt itself to a completely different environment. Doesn't want to do that, of course. It liked when it had. It was comfortable there. It does not want to do that. So there's resistance to it. It's kind of a, it goes through phases of anger and denial, which are all part of grief. Now, if no story gets laid on top of that, if one just allows the grief to run its course, it won't last very long. The system will adapt. And, the thoughts that are, send just ripples of pain throughout the system will simply become pleasant memories, because they will now be integrated into this bigger environment. If you resist the natural process of grieving, that's where the suffering comes in. We try to do a reframe, or somebody comes to tell you, oh, it's okay, they're in heaven now, which is a reframe, right? I don't care if they're in heaven, they're not here. We want to imagine their continuity and all of that. And there is some continuity, just not form, right? And if it's formless, they're actually still here, but that form isn't there. And that's the intersection. So if there's no reframing, if there's no denial, if there's no trying to push it away, if you give yourself time to really let yourself grieve and not resist it, because we do resist pain, obviously, the more you submit to it, the faster it adapts itself and the grief goes away. But suffering is resistance. There's no suffering in life. Doesn't mean life is always easy. It doesn't mean it's not harsh. Life lives, one life lives by taking another. That's the way it works. There's no getting around it, right? Which is one of the essential mysteries that humans have looked at forever. It's like, well, how is this like that? And it led to, the so-called primitive people, having an enormous amount of respect for the thing that they were going to kill in order to eat, whether it be a plant or another animal. They would have rituals, right? Because the animal was willingly letting itself be killed for their survival. Beautiful mythological stories and about the nature of this. But it's because we get in touch with the central mystery of life. And Buddha put it very simply: life is suffering. The very fact that it ends, that the forms we love so much end, right, means that suffering is inevitable. The only way out of suffering is total acceptance of it. That's the mystery. That's the wonder. And that's the heart and soul of Buddhism. To be free of suffering is to be free of the sufferer. How do you do that? You completely surrender to it. No resistance. When you completely surrender to it, you simply let life be what it is without judgment. And that means you let yourself feel without judgment. You feel the love intensely. You feel the grief intensely. You don't cut off any part of life because you like these parts better. Okay? If you're total acceptance, you don't like this part better than that part. You recognize the entire tapestry of life is mysterious, awe-inspiring, miraculous, and just beyond what you can possibly imagine. And then we just set to the work of eternity, which is writing music and poetry, celebrating the mystery, creating stories, myths and legends and the like. This is the theme throughout all of human history. I started rereading Joseph Campbell which I haven't read. I rewatched The Power of Myth that he did with Bill Moyers years ago, and this is the theme. It's this essential mystery. And when our materiality is tried to take the mystery and make it all this explainable phenomenon. And of course, it's stolen the soul out of it. It's reduced people to commodities, objectified us. You are no longer inherently valuable because your life. You're only valuable based on the skills you have to sell in the marketplace. We have literally destroyed humanity with this idea of materiality. We've destroyed the best part of us. So, does that answer it for you, Sally? She is to distinguish between genuine life. It's all of its ups and downs, right? Because the depth of the grief you'll feel is the depth of the love, right? I mean, you cannot have one without the other. It's the yin yang. If I didn't feel grief, it meant I didn't really love that much, Somebody steals somebody else's car, it doesn't really affect me very much. The closer I am to the one whose car was stolen, up to me, and now it starts to have a lot of meaning, right? So, but suffering is simply a resistance to that. Somehow our minds get the idea that we shouldn't be. And that's a form of madness. That's what that is. Sally says, I find this hard to believe that there's no person there as the spiritual teachings imply. There is no person in the sense that there's no separate self, that this body did not give rise to a being. There's no being here. You could say there's one person, one infinite being. And that infinite being can manifest as countless forms, but those forms aren't different from or separate from that being any more than the image in the mirror is different from you. So it's not like the being divides itself into beings. The being merely pictures itself. It ponders its own infinite nature. In the pondering of its own infinite nature, there's the experience of being someone. And the true being projects its self onto that and gives it a sense of selfness, which of course is great. That's how we have experience, right? Now, if the thought gets in there that you actually are a separate self, right? You have just created an imaginary schism between you and you. Now that's schizophrenia, if ever I heard it, right? So when you use the word there's no person, a lot of people think there's no me. That's not what it is. Yes, there is a you, but that you is not this form. The you is the infinite consciousness that is perceiving the form, and the form is a reflection of or a manifestation of one aspect of that infinite consciousness. But that one aspect is itself infinite. Because of course, the infinite expresses itself in infinity. You don't divide infinitude up. It's just layer upon layer upon layer. Every individual, every flower, every insect is a universe. The one is inconceivable. It's the mystery. So a lot of people are they kind of take it aback. There is no person. You mean there's no me? And Buddha was accused of nihilism. Materialism is nihilism, right? To the materialist, you are your body. Your consciousness is a frontal lobe in the front of your forehead, which means that you're not really a self. You're just a very complex set of functions. And when this destroyed, you're gone, oblivion, right? And I've looked at that every which way to see if there's any foundation there for such a claim. I just can't find it. I can't find it. What is perceiving all of this? To just reduce it to a body. But that would mean then that when we use the word person, what I'm referring to, and I know what Mooji, who uses it all the time, he is referring to the idea we hold of ourselves, believed to be what we actually are, which is finite and limited. That's the person. But the person doesn't exist except as a thought. But you do. You are quite real, just not as a person. You are the energy field, you might say, the great field of consciousness. That's what you are. Does that answer it for you, Sally? David, hello, David. GP, years ago I dreamt I was in the presence of God. The feeling was love, but I felt compelled to fall to my knees in its presence. Yeah. Is there a hierarchy or order to consciousness? A first cause? No. That's not what it means. Yeah, I've had that experience. I have been brought to my knees, just overwhelmed by in awe in the face of pure love, as you were. Now, when you have an experience like that, the sense of yourself as being different from that love is still there, right? But that true love breaks through the imaginary world we've created, of an unloving world out there. And, my defensive mechanism, defended against that. And of course, in Western teachings, Abrahamic religions, it's all, God hates you. He's condemning you. You're worthless in his sight. And so there's, we're forever judging ourselves and criticizing and trying to improve, and personal development after personal development. But when you have that experience of the pure, unbridled, impersonal, infinite love that wipes all of that away, the sense of relief and freedom is so huge that, yes, you fall to your knees. It's a religious moment. You're in the presence of God. Now, you have not yet realized that presence is your own nature. That's who you really are. This is God awakening to herself. Right? But in the beginning, when you have an experience like that, there's still a sense of me having that experience. There's still a me, and then there's still a God. But all of a sudden, this God now becomes much more rarefied, much more infinite, much more vast, not so human, vindictive, not so tribal, not a Bronze Age tribal God, smite your enemies and that sort of thing. It becomes this absolutely universal, all-embracing love. Taste that, you can see what motivated Christ. You can see what motivated Buddha. You can see the energy that is reflected there. Love your neighbors yourself, then they'll know that you are my children. Right? In our journey, we don't get right to the, I am love, I am God. You don't get right to that place. At first, there's these experiences, and they're so heart-opening, which has to happen, right, that we fall to our knees. It just means that there's still some element there of believing ourselves to be a separate self, but it's a clear indication that the days of that separate self are numbered. So no, there's no hierarchy or order to consciousness. It's just the level on which it's being perceived, and therefore the level on which it is being interpreted and understood. When it is actually seen from the universal oneness, you'll see that the act of somebody waking up, having that kind of experience, is itself a beautiful image of awareness that awareness is aware of, because it's a spectacularly beautiful moment. And that moment brought to you by awareness, right? All of it, right? Not just awareness waking up, but awareness, the asleepness, and then the awakeness, and then the worship is all being witnessed, is all giving expression to that infinite consciousness that you are. How's that, David? Sarah Sands. Hi, GP. Sarah from France. I'm happy to be here with you all. Happy. So good to have you here, Sarah. Chris Skills. Ooh, where'd he go? Skipped ahead. Is everything consciousness, GP? So the mind isn't really there. There's only consciousness. Yes, the mind is simply another formation of consciousness. I mean, it's like saying, no, it's funny. I say that kind of stuff. Really, everything's consciousness, but nobody hesitates to say everything's matter. Everything's made of matter. Everything's atoms and subatomic particles. Nobody, everything's made of that, right? Nobody questions it. What's the difference? The only difference is the substance of the universe is not a mindless object out there somewhere. The substance of the universe is consciousness. So everything is consciousness. Do you ever experience anything outside of consciousness? I mean, just look. If you experience something outside of consciousness, well, then what are you? right? You can't. You cannot have an experience outside of consciousness. So what is the experience actually made of? We believe that the experience is made of something independent from consciousness, which means consciousness stops here. There's a world out here. Somehow there's this little interface that I'm receiving information, and that's what I experience. But that's an image in consciousness. All I ever experience is consciousness. The thing and the knowing of the thing are one and the same. You can't have a thing without knowing it. I mean, the best science reveals that the universe is this totally full and totally empty at the same time. What we perceive at this level of form does not actually exist. It is all in our perception, that they're simply pools of vibration. But we're so convinced that they actually make an object independent of me that I am perceiving that we're locked in our little bubble. There's nothing out there other than your perception. You are simply creating your own world. Well, I shouldn't say you are creating it. Consciousness is creating its own world. The you think you are is part of the creation within that new world. So consciousness is what you are. And I just invite you to explore the boundaries for yourself. See if you can find a border where consciousness ends and something else begins. If that's the case, what you would have to run into is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because if there's something out there, you are experiencing it in consciousness. Now you can believe it's out there or not, right? But you can't doubt the fact that everything you actually experience is in consciousness. So go to the boundaries of it. See if you can find something outside of consciousness. You'll find you can't. If you did, you'd find nothing, which would be really nothing, which means nothing is outside of consciousness, right? I mean, real nothing, not just an absence of something, but really nothing. Nothing is outside of consciousness. And I just invite you to really probe this, right? Really, really look. Can you find a boundary to consciousness? You can find mental boundaries. You can find concepts that say there's a boundary. But when you look closely, but that's just a thought in consciousness. And put that aside. And just keep going. See if you can actually find it. If there is one, you should be able to find it, right? I mean, this room has a boundary. Easy. I know how I can find it. I can just get up, walk over there, right? And I find the boundary to it. Consciousness, can you do that? You can't, because it's not in space. Nazrin. Hello, Nazrin. Hi, G. I asked 2 questions last week and listened to your response over and over again. For a long time, I felt something is wrong with me and I'm broken. Turns out that I'm not. Yes, you're not. That's just a thought. I pay attention to my feelings and noticed what's missing in my life is joy. I feel liberated and alive. I am not broken and nothing is there to be fixed. But who am I? Well, my friend, you are now You know, as God said to Moses, when Moses turned to look at the burning bush, take off your shoes. You are standing on holy ground. To recognize that you are not broken, that the universe is functioning perfectly, is the key to the liberation and the healing of all the childhood wounds and traumas and all the stuff that we've been through lifetime after lifetime. But if I'm not my conditioning, if nothing is actually wrong, if I've been spending my whole life trying to fix something that's not broken, who am I? Who is this unbroken wholeness? Who is this original innocence? What was there before conditioning occurred? Or to quote the Zen koan, what did you look like before your parents were born? Who am I? You know, you hear me and other teachers say, but you're pure awareness, you're pure consciousness. But again, that's just a pointer. And the mind's very happy to take that as an idea and then wave that around like it knows who it is. And I've seen that in some various non-duality Advaita Facebook groups. You see a bunch of people who've taken that as an idea, and now they're arguing over who's the best teacher and all that kind of stuff. Right? They're just words to point you to someplace. When I point your attention to consciousness, what I'm doing is I'm pointing your attention to the place where you are experiencing everything. Right? Consciousness isn't a concept, right? I don't want to present you with a concept of consciousness because you are conscious. I want you to know the actual experience that is consciousness, your own experience of being, right? And knowing that you are. Now, what is that? We have a lot of ideas as to what it is. Even awareness and consciousness and I amness are all ideas, right? They're good, right? Useful pointers. I talk a lot, right? so having useful pointers is valuable to me, right? But the actual answer cannot come from a concept. The answer is an intuitive hit. So I point you, when I use the word consciousness, I am deliberately pointing you to that which is hearing my words right now. That point of cognition, the place that is actually perceiving. That's where I'm pointing you. And I want you to just become absorbed in that. That's what meditation is about, absorption in attempting to see that which cannot be seen because you are the seer, right? The knife can't cut itself. A scale can't weigh itself. The eye cannot see itself. Consciousness cannot perceive itself. In order to perceive itself, it would have to stand outside. And it can't. And it's infinite. So there's no outside to stand in. So knowing who you are is not intellectual. It is not conceptual. It is existential. It is spiritual. It is self-reflected. It is self-realized. I am that. And it just takes patience to consistently to remain unsatisfied with conceptual answers and to continually bring your attention back to the actual experience of being conscious. And then looking for the one who's actually conscious. And the only thing you can come back to is just, it's just me. The me itself is it. I am that. And then it's just an illumination that takes place. And it is the ultimate true knowledge. It's the Vedanta. It's beyond knowledge. It's prajnaparamita. It's the wisdom from completely beyond. And one of the names that is given to Buddha is the Tathagata, which means one who comes from beyond. The Buddha is an appearance. Even referred to it as an apparition Buddha. It is an appearance in form of what in fact is formless, and everything is. The Buddha is you. The Christ is you. The real you, not the image you hold of yourself, but the real you. That which is actually having the experience of listening to me right now is the Buddha. And the experience, that which is having the experience of listening, is also the one having the experience of speaking. And in fact, every single one of you who is listening, there's 52 of you right in this moment, it's all exactly the same essence that is experiencing. And again, you can just, as you immerse yourself in that, it becomes self-evident that this is life itself. This is consciousness itself, and it is the same everywhere. No matter how it appears, no matter who appears to be experiencing it, the actual experiencer is one. So, thank you, Nazrin. I hope that helps you with the next phase of the beautiful journey. What time is it? I can never tell. Oh, 2:24. I got my half hour. Yeah. Okay. David, thank you so much for being here. I am grateful for the energy you are transmitting in the world. Oh, thank you. The world is the energy that's being transmitted. It is all originating from the same place. The world exists as an image in our collective minds. So we are, in a sense, the one having a shared experience of being the one. It's amazing. It's mind-boggling, is what it is. But the important thing to note is that which is doing the transmitting and that which is receiving the transmitting are the same. There's nothing special about this form. The magic is in the energy that flows through it. Barbara, hello from Sweden. Sorry, but I have to say goodnight. Yes, I know it's late there, Barbara. So good to see you. Teresa, gee, what are your thoughts on non-dual spiritual teachers who are actually very good, very evolved, and make a lot of money out of teaching? What can I comment about it? If I happen to make a lot of money out of teaching, I mean, if they're for real, it won't have any effect one way or the other on their essential awakened state, right? If they're not actually genuine, it will. It'll have an impact. I mean, there's been times when I've had a lot of money, right? And on the surface, I live very, very differently. But from the times when I didn't have a lot of money, right? But I was essentially the same, right? I was talking about this, thinking about this, interested in this. There's some things that I did that were extremely valuable, right? And so they were plentifully rewarded. And I do teach classes for in charge. Although lately I've started doing it by donation. I did it once and it worked really well. So it's if it doesn't disturb the awakening, it's not really a problem. I do know, as somebody who puts themselves out there as a teacher, and I do classes, and which means I have computer systems and all these other stuff that I need to do it. It's very easy to get sucked in to the world's version of what it is. It can become all about the money, and I know plenty of people who claim to be spiritual teachers, but they're really just salesmen selling pretty thoughts, and wanting to make a good living out of it. Even some that will do $100,000 coaching packages and things like that. I go, okay, the ones that I know that are real, it doesn't affect them. It didn't affect Eckhart Tolle. Matter of fact, he was asked once about, well, you make a lot of money. You have a popular, best-selling book now. How does that make you feel? And he says, well, it made my mother very happy. Had no it had no effect whatsoever. She says, a teacher I saw recently makes an absolute fortune. Yeah, some do. Some might. Is it fraudulent? No, not really. I think there's a certain kind of openness and flow. The guy who created the Sedona method, Lester Levinson, was an awakened being. And when he awoke, there was a lot of stuff he processed through. He says, I've always wanted to be a millionaire. So he just visioned it, then he became a millionaire. I mean, that's the level of freedom he had. And then at one point he had all these millions and he just gave it away. Right? Oh yeah, I did that. Okay, he gave it away. And for the bulk of his life after that, he lived very modestly. Some stuff accumulated, a small fortune accumulated, which his students then completely used up fighting over his assets when he was gone. But he would just, whatever he needed would come to him. So it wasn't like that. So you can't judge. You can't make a flat out rule that if they're a real teacher, they shouldn't be making any money. In some cultures, that's the case. That's the way they do that. You're not going to find a real teacher in India, for instance, who's charging a lot of money. It's just kind of open, and it's all by donation and giving. So if somebody's accumulating an enormous amount of wealth, I would actually have to talk to them personally to find out what about. Is that some kind of a thing they want? Is it an attachment of theirs? Is it just kind of happened? I know Sadhguru is very, very wealthy, but most of his wealth goes into his charities, right? Which are huge. I mean, enormous charity work being funded. So, it's a kind of thing I just choose not to judge. To say, it can show up that way. We live in a world that needs money, so it could show up that way. It can show up as somebody just living on very little, right, and being quite content. Are they happy? Are they communicating happiness? Are the people they touch experiencing more peace and happiness? Well, then they're probably doing a good thing. So October Paul says, who is doing the inquiry? Well, ultimately it is seen that the inquiry itself is being perceived by something that is not inquiring. What does pure awareness have to inquire about? Just stop for a moment. The inquiry is us harmonizing our minds, our sense of identity, to what actually is. That's what the inquiry is for. If you just do a simple exercise of focusing your attention just on the sense of being, the experience of just the sense of being is not an inquiry. It's direct access to reality. Now, there's a lot of overhead still there. There's thoughts about who we are, and there's patterns. There's a lot of stuff going on that wants to pull our focus away from that. And it's for that the inquiry exists. It's the means for the sense of a separate self to find its way back, to see through its own non-existence and end up back where it originally originated from. And of course, there's no um, there's no inquiry, there's no discovery. Right? Now, some invited teachers say, well, there's no inquiry, there's nobody to inquire, and go off on that. But it still doesn't, the fact that there isn't any discovery, right? So discovery then becomes a manifestation that the pure awareness that does not need to be discovered experiences discovery. Because obviously we're talking about it. There's an existence there. There's an experience, right? And then something new happens. Well, the nature of the self is inexhaustible, right? So the realm of potential experiences are inexhaustible. They always come in opposites, right? So there's going to be an ignorance corrected by a knowledge. And that correction is a moment of bliss, isn't it? The sense of not knowing, then fulfilled with the knowing, is utter bliss. And the depth of the not knowing is exactly proportionate to the depth of the bliss from the knowing, right? and so, and the entire scene is taking place against the background of awareness, which in and of itself needs to discover nothing, but gives rise to the possibility of the experience of discovery. Am I saying this correctly? You guys are great. I mean, it doesn't get much deeper than this. Right? You're right. You're just walking right on the edge, that middle way, that absolutely transcendent place between the absolute and the relative, and finding that they're not two. That's the mistake that a lot of invited teachers make, that, oh, that one isn't real and this is. No, neither of them are. It is this, which is, characterized, in the Christian Trinity. That's what it actually represents. You have the Father, which is the absolute. You have the Son, which is the relative, that is the Word made flesh, the absolute truth appearing as form. And then you have the Holy Spirit, which is this incredible dance. So this is not just solid Father, Son, it is a dance. And it is the dance of the universe. The Hindu trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva is very, very simple. Similar. It's the same kind of thing. Vishnu simply being the sustainer of the universe. As it gets created, it's sustained, and then it's destroyed, and it just goes like that. Right? It's a dance. It's the same dance, right? And so you can say the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, these three are one. You can. Right? They're three aspects of the same thing. Sat, Chit, and Ananda. They are three aspects of the same transcendent essence, which cannot be pictured. So we see it in terms of aspects. We see reality as the absolute, or God. Right? We see the reality as manifest, music in the song. We see the song, which is the manifestation of music. That's the sun, right? And then this constant interplay, the fact their oneness is the Holy Spirit. It's perfect. John M. says, God does not suffer. No. You have to create an imaginary sufferer in order to suffer. Pheromans. Hi, G. If both the observer and the observed are thought, observer is the observed, then is J. Krishnamurti implying that the observed is truth and that there is no center that witnesses them? No. The observer, as he meant it, and as all real teachers do, the observer is the field of consciousness, and it's quite real. And I mean, you're witnessing, so obviously there's a witness, right? Then who is that witness is the question, right? We think of the witness as being this person, this individual thing, which is witnessing somebody else over there witnessing. We don't see the universality of it. When we think of ourselves as a person observing, right? Like I'm standing here looking at the screen here. That's also being observed, isn't it? right? So that it's very subtle, but the one we take ourselves to be, the one we think is the perceiver, is actually being perceived. The real perceiver is the undifferentiated field of pure awareness. That is always the one that is doing the perceiving. We have identified ourselves with a form, a particular person, shape, and characteristics, and all of that. And so, through this self-image, there's the idea that I, this image, am perceiving. Right? Of course, I'm not. Right? Now, when you examine it closely, you find that all the qualities that make up this perceiver, this person, are themselves observable phenomena. Even the idea that it is a separate self is an observable phenomenon because you can see it. It's subtler. Thoughts are way subtler than, say, a rock or something, but it's an observable phenomena. And just keep pushing that that you find that the actual perceiver itself is not a phenomena. It is not observable. And that is what is really meant, that the observer is also being observed, which means the ultimate witness has no observer. Nothing is observing it. And it cannot be observed. Is that clear, Pheromens? John M. says, that's funny because they blocked it. I don't know if you noticed, they blocked it. They let me see it to see if I want to show it to everybody else in the chat. John M. said, deep shit, GP. Appreciate the more analytical prognosis. I've seen few who do it. Love the in-depth thought and Tao answers. Oh, thank you. Oh, Pheromens continues. Yeah, it is deep shit, isn't it? It's the deepest, And why do we do this? Because it's so satisfying. It's like when you sink your feet into the earth of truth, it's like, oh my God, I'm home. There's actually something solid. It's nothing solid like matter. It's not solid like a position or a belief. It's solid as a rock, though. Pheromans. He states that we are fear, greed, jealousy, joy, etc., the objects, and without these images, there is no center. Correct. Yeah, that is correct. That contradicts to me the idea that we are awareness of these images and not the images themselves. Right? Without those images, what he's saying is that without those images, look, the self, what we call the self, is a collection of energies. Fear, greed, jealousy, but joy, happiness, love, attachment, aversion, all the pairs of opposites, which are there, which are operating. You can't have life without the pair of opposites. We project upon those selfhood. So instead of seeing just a collection of stuff functioning, we imagine it to be a conscious entity. It's like, your car functions, but you don't imagine it. We could, right? If somebody didn't know what a car was and they saw it driving down the street, they'd be terrified. They'd think it was a being of some kind, right? Maybe probably even a god, right? And yet that's exactly what we do. When you really deconstruct what makes up the person, you find a bundle of qualities, of energies: fear, greed, avarice, doubt, happiness, joy, passion, all of these things, all of those, but they don't belong to anybody. The one who is supposed to be greedy and loving, or all of that, is an image projected on what in fact is simply the functioning of life. And that means this has no center. And pure awareness has no center. And it also has no circumference. It's everywhere is the center. I think it was a Black Elk. Yes, Black Elk Speak, who had a vision. Black Elk was a medicine man, in I think in the Sioux Nation. He wrote a beautiful book called Black Elk Speaks. As a young boy, like 12 years old, he had an enormous vision where he was basically transported to the center of the universe. And in his vision, he said, and the center of the universe is Mount, I don't remember the name of the mountain. It was a mountain in South Dakota, I think, or something like that. It says the center of the universe is this mountain, but the center of the universe is everywhere. That was his vision. He saw, where's the center? Wherever I am. And where am I? Everywhere. Yeah. The idea of center, circumference are based on space-time. They're based on conceptual framework. They're based on me being a self here, and protracted, limited, confined. Take that away, and where's the center? There isn't one. There's no space at all. Everything is me. So does that help there, buddy? Oh, he keeps going. Why am I missing you? Why am I missing that? If I accept the form that I am fear and greed, then I notice there isn't any internal conflict and I can easily surrender. Yes. I like that. Oh, this is good. I mean, that's inner reconciliation, right? Yeah. When you accept that the entirety of your being is made, not your being, your experience, the human being, the human form is made of opposite pairs of energy, love and hate, good and evil, that these operate, that aren't actually opposites, they're actually yin and yang of one single energy. When you see that, you stop rejecting parts of you, and that's where you become whole. That's what inner reconciliation is the process by which you come to fully accept all of you, and you realize that the only reason you haven't accepted it is because you were told lies about it, that it was something bad, something you had to get rid of, something that was inappropriate, you're broken and need to be fixed, and all of that kind of stuff. But the moment you realize it is one stupendous whole, that every piece of it is absolutely necessary, and the only reason one looked good and the other looked bad is because you took an artificial position. At that point, you surrender that position. That's what the surrender means. You are surrendering your point of view. You are surrendering your perceptions. You are surrendering your posture, your position. And the moment you do that, the entire universe as it is comes into focus, because there's nothing picking and choosing, saying this is good, this is bad. I call that the energy of the peacemaker. It's symbolized by the heart chakra and all that. It's the area that's just completely lets anything come. It's completely open. It doesn't have a position. Of course, that's the Holy Spirit. The position of surrender, the position of not taking a position, which means that everything is seen exactly as it is. It is not seen through any lens. You take a position and now the world looks one way. Take a different position, it looks another way, right? Take the position away and you see things as they are. Buddhism may refer to that as suchness, right? What is it? What is this? This is this and nothing else. So yes, you actually embrace what you thought was unembraceable. Greed, of course, there's greed in all of us. All of us, you can feel the body wanting stuff for itself. Simultaneously, there's altruism. Both of these which are on the surface are complete opposites. The total physical survival and total ascension, right? All of these are happening simultaneously, and this happening simultaneously of these incredible opposites is the human being. That is the form through which undifferentiated consciousness is expressing itself. And the particular set of combination of various characteristics that make up a form are like the instrument in an orchestra. There's violins, there's violas, there's tubas, there's drums, right? It's all the same energy manifesting through it, but that energy is congealing, condensing into different kinds of forms, which create a different kind of experience, right? So the same sun hits different flowers, and in one instance I see red, another instance I see blue. It's the same sun, and the color belongs to the sun, not to the flower. How are we doing on time? Ah, good. Yeah, we're still good. Oh, I need some water here. Am I getting to your to the heart of your question there, Pheromans? I like that. Yeah. Janet McGowan. Hello, Janet. Hi, GP. What are your views on eating meat? Is there right or wrong? Is there karma attached? Does it affect our collective consciousness? Ultimately, no. Relatively, yes. Meat eating in the modern world has become an addiction. We don't need it. There are plenty of other sources for the nutrition that we actually do need. And it has an enormous impact on humanity. So I don't eat meat. I haven't for 25 years. And it's not part of my teaching. You need to become, if you're going to listen to me, you need to become a vegan or a vegetarian. It isn't the eating of the meat that has the bad karma attached to it. Because, then lions would have nothing but bad karma because that's all they do is eat meat. And there's a certain recognition we all need that we live by something else dying. The transformation of energy is life, right? And there's no way around it, right? Whether that be a plant, and plants seem to be less of a deal because they can regrow, or the life's over anyway, right? When a carrot is ready to be pulled, its life is over anyway. The bushes that keep bringing berries, it's no big deal. It's just like cutting your fingernails. But when we're taking the life of another sentient being, we're operating on a different level. The primitive people who were still in touch with the earth, who had not yet gotten completely divorced from the earth like we have, recognized the mystery of it. They recognized the significance of it and recognized that it was a holy event, and that taking one life so that you could live, there was inevitably needed some kind of an interchange. And there's so many myths. Again, I'm reading Joseph Campbell. There's so many myths about how, like, the buffalo dance came into existence and that sort of thing. It was a way in which it was the recognition that life would go on, that their life here would go on, but that which was giving its life so that I could live would also go on. It's the idea of a resurrection. It's a very old idea. It didn't originate with Christ. It'd been around thousands of years before that his actual experience. So they would have very significant rituals to basically to make amends, to honor the mystery of this, that they were a part of this web of life, and that there was not a disconnect. The karma comes because we've reduced everything to a mindless commodity. So we're harvesting huge quantities of animals. There's no thought about it. There's no sacredness to it. There's no honoring of the fact that, wow, this is how life works. There's no sense of the mystery. It becomes highly barbaric, highly that's even the wrong word, primitive, because the primitives weren't like that. It's not primitive. I don't know what to call it. It's depraved. It's insane. And that's the creator of the bad karma. And it's not just karma for past lives we're experiencing. That's what's going on in the earth. It is the cesspool of egoic thinking that is dominating the planet, that is creating the environment that is self-destructing. Because where's the life? We're sucking the life out of it because we've sucked it out of our minds. We don't see things as alive. We see them as dead. You know, Monsanto's reduced everything to these little patterns that it can manipulate. If you talk to a materialistic chemist, everything's just together. They can everything. There's just no sense of the complexity, the matrix, the interdependency of all these energies of the web of life. That's the cause of karma, because it's a deep, deep darkness. It's the essence of the Kali Yuga that we're sitting in the middle of. So I don't do it. I don't participate in it. I recommend that people don't do it. So on a karmic level, there is stuff going on, but the moment you begin to see that these are other forms through which consciousness is manifesting itself, just like consciousness is manifesting itself through this form, there are our brothers and our sisters, our mothers and our fathers. Even that bug is the same as me. So if I'm having to kill something and eat it, I need to make a sacrifice. I need to sacrifice something for that. I need to give something back. But I've chosen just not to do that at all, to not take any lives. And the weight of that karma is getting more and more intense. Animal agriculture is the number one cause of global warming. Number one. More than all the rest put together. Between our appetite for food and the killing of the animals, and we have I don't know how many, it's like, I don't know, billions and billions of animals slaughtered every year. And the methane, basically cow farts, right? Methane is 4 times more destructive and creates than carbon dioxide. It's even worse. Plus the raising of the Amazonian rainforests to make cattle ranches. So it's deforesting large chunks of it, which is our lungs. It's insane. It's utterly insane. It's you can't reason with it. And so yes, there's a huge karmic impact on it, as there is for everything. Do no harm. It's the basic Buddhist tenet. Do no harm. Right? If you can't alleviate suffering, just at least don't cause any. If there's a way for you to do anything that causes less strife and suffering and conflict, well, that's the way you should do it. I mean, that just is self-evident. So thank you for bringing that up, Janet. I normally actually don't go into it that much, but you inspired me, so I did. Carla, Ibrahim says, thank you, G. Oh, great, a little dove, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Carla, Surrogates 2009, Bruce Willis movie. Yes, not a very good movie, but a really great story. I really liked the idea. It's very hard to see the world like an illusion, more even to me, like an illusion. Well, yeah, don't mistake illusion for like hallucination. Stuff is here. It's just we misinterpret what it is. Right? And so it becomes an object in and of itself that exists independent of my perception of it. The illusion isn't the object. The illusion is thinking the object is separate from consciousness. So to wake up doesn't mean everything disappears. You just don't see it as separate anymore. It's very simple. It seems hard only because of our habits of thought. That's all. And what we're here in Satsang to do is to challenge those, to switch them up, and make different habits of thought, better habits of thought, and then eventually just transcend thought altogether, so that we experience directly without the vehicle of thought. Thought then becomes a servant. in which we can describe things, we can have conversations, we can tell jokes, you know, we can have fun, right? Because without that, life becomes a celebration in all of its glory. Thank you, Nazran. Carrie Broga says, hi, G, thanks for your wisdom. You're very welcome. October Paul said, oops, very beautifully answered with gratitude. Good. Glad I nailed it for you. David and Elaine, thanks, GP, for your answer. Always very much appreciated. Let's see what the time is here. Okay. What do we got here? Rohan, many thanks, GP. Can you do more guided meditations? I discovered your channel through the one you did about the moon's reflection in the pond. It's just incredible. And your voice is just perfect for it. Yes, this form has a nice voice. It has been useful. I won't have it forever. And actually, I have heard some recordings of me from a long time ago, and it's changed quite dramatically. And Rohan again says, do you do one-on-one sessions? I feel like I may need to help extracting thought, beliefs, including awareness, or clouding awareness, so to speak. Yes, I do. You can, I think if you go to gpwalsh.com, on the far left in the menu, there's a private session thing that you can pay for and sign up for a private session. And if they're too expensive, because I do have to charge for my time, just let me know. I usually find a way to work things out with somebody. If they really feel moved to have that, we'll find a way to make it happen. Pharaoh Man says, wow, thank you, GP. Cleared up my doubts so perfectly. Good. Yay. Dale Wiggins, how to go trying to help loved ones and friends that are suffering. I want to tell them about the truth of non-duality, but I'm sure what approach would work without sounding insane. Yeah, I mean, really, if most of the world listened to what we're talking about here so open and freely and read the questions, they go, what? The first rule, of being able to alleviate somebody else's suffering is to totally embrace it. You embrace them and their experience. You let them have the experience they're having. So you show up without a motivation, without an agenda, without feeling you need to fix something. All you have is the desire to alleviate suffering and a sense that you know how it might be done. Very powerful feeling. So now you simply cherish that. Cherish that natural feeling of the heart that simply wants to alleviate suffering. That's the bodhisattva spirit. It wants to alleviate suffering, and it'll come back lifetime after lifetime, even walk into hell in order to do it. So just cherish that spirit, but leave your mind out of it and let the spirit move you. Right? If it doesn't move you, don't do anything. Don't say anything. Just be present. The presence itself will be felt and be an alleviation. Just being in your presence will have an effect. Thinking about you will have an effect for them. And then, should this be the way it unfolds for them, some opportunity will happen for you to share something. Something from your own heart, from your own experience, from your own sense of being. And then a beautiful communion will take place. Not a lecture, not an education, but a real communion. Two people together looking for the truth of being, looking for the way out of suffering, looking for the answer to the problems that have plagued humanity since we were human. when you have that spirit and a complete willingness to be patient, maybe even permanently, never saying anything at all, that energy is what will alleviate suffering. Right away? I don't know. It can. You know, there's some people you just want to be around them. You don't even know why. You just kind of want to be around them because they have that energy. They have that feeling of love and acceptance. And love and acceptance of them, love and acceptance of their circumstances, and love and acceptance of the necessity of the suffering that wakes us up. And if you're willing to accept that and surrender to it yourself, you become the vehicle by which it can happen for others. But that's the way it has to happen. You become the Buddha first. Albert Hill. Hi, Mr. G. Hope you're okay. I am. Thank you very much. Thanks, GP, for confirming my thoughts. Meat free now. Great. Good. But please don't become one of those annoying people that wants everybody to know. I remember 25 years ago, I was living in New York City when I became a vegetarian. And I mean, this experience I had just brought it home so clearly. I had to do it. But boy, it was hard to find vegetarian food. Everybody said, "Oh, well, here, give them a salad." But no, I want food. I need a meal, right? If I ever went back to places like the Midwest, I was like, forget it. I just forget it. It's not so bad now. Now there's lots of vegetarian options when you go out in life. There's lots of understanding on it. It's actually, you know, if you notice how much bigger the vegetable departments in grocery stores have become, how much bigger the organic sections have become. It's everywhere where now. You know, meat eating is obsolete. We can't afford to do it. The earth can't afford to do it. It's unsustainable in every single asset. So aspect. So it's just a matter of we're addicted to something that's killing us. That's really all it is. It's a social addiction. So thank you. I'm glad to hear that too. Micah says, my family always thinks I'm insane. Thank you from Sydney on Monday morning. Yes, well, to an insane world, the sane person looks mad, don't they? But to quote Wu Hussein, if the village idiot calls you stupid, do you pay it any attention? So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for participating in this. Thank you for opening your hearts and your minds to the genuine message that is coming to you from you, that is seen by you and is emerging out of you. You are the self, recognizing the self. Just a quick note, if any of you still want to get the replay for the oneness class, it's going to be up for a couple minutes more. In a couple days more, and then I am taking it down. So if you want to get it, just go to gpwalsh.com/one, and you can get that just for a donation. And I will be taking that down because I'm going to be doing another class in September, which will also be a donation thing. Similar subject, but I'm going to, in the next one, I'm calling it Gaia's Dream. And it's going to be the same kind of oneness. We're going to go deeply into that sense of oneness and unity and connection. But the subtitle is, can the non-dual realization of the self heal a broken world? The other side of it, the alleviation of suffering. The non-dual insight is wonderful, but if you stop there, you have missed the boat. You go up the mountain for yourself, you come down the mountain for others. And so the nature of the full experience is not just non-duality as vision, is non-duality as life. I am one with everything. If I really am one with everything, how then do I treat the imagined others? That's what I want to go into. So that's coming up. Love you all. Thank you. Namaste.